Good evening, City Point Church. This is another of our Wednesday devotionals, and I'm glad to come to you today. I've just been thinking about this, that, we are a number of weeks into this stay-at-home order where much of the time we're living in a kind of an isolated state, and things are certainly out of the ordinary, and we're getting to the place where we're really missing the interaction and connection that we need and long for in our hearts. And so I just want to come to you today and ask you to make a bit of an assessment of yourself and just ask you, how are you? How are you doing, really? And for you to think about that a little bit. I wore this shirt today on purpose for this devotional. Solo Hunter is one of my favorite hunting television shows, and the guys are super skilled. It's really kind of a cool show, but their kind of mantra is doing things by themselves, and so they hunt and they video themselves. But if that's not a great motto for life, being isolated, being by ourselves is not really the way to go. And I've been reading in 1 Samuel, and 1 Samuel is this book that's a transitional book from the time of the Judges, where Samuel's the prophet, and he then anoints Saul to be the king. And then as Saul proves his unfaithfulness, God anoints David to be the king. And if you know the story, you know that just by being anointed as the king, David didn't instantly ascend to the throne. He had an incredible amount of trials and hardships that he faced over the course of the next several years in his life before he actually took the throne. And at one point, there is this extended period of time where he's actually running for his life. He's not all alone, but he is not with the people that he loves, and he's isolated. He's outside of Jerusalem, outside of without being able to be with the people that he really wants to be with. And so it's a really difficult time for him. And in 1 Samuel 23, David is actually running for his life. Saul is pursuing him, it says, every day. And so here's the king, Saul, who is trying to kill David. And David has other people who are mistreating him and kind of going behind his back. And it's just really a tough time for him. And so, and then it says this, Jonathan is David's best friend. Jonathan is also one of Saul's sons. And so there's this kind of crazy dynamic taking place there. But Jonathan, it says, goes to David out in the wilderness, and he finds David, and it says that he strengthened David's hand in God. He encouraged him to remain faithful to God. And this is what he says to him. He says, do not fear. God is going to fulfill his promises for you, and I'm with you. And I thought, oh, friends, that is the message that we all need to hear and that we all need to communicate, that we encourage one another to remain faithful to God, to strengthen one another's hands in God. And with this, friends, over and again, the Bible tells us not to fear. Jonathan tells David not to fear. And there's plenty to fear. There's plenty of cause for fear in the situations that we're facing right now. But we need to remember, God is with us. Do not fear. And this promise, as Jonathan tells David, God is going to fulfill his promises to you. And I don't know all of the promises that God has made to you. I'm still trying to consider the promises that God has made to me. And in the midst of this, we need to be reminded that God is going to fulfill his promises to us because he's so faithful. And then this last part is not insignificant. Jonathan tells David, I am with you. And so here's what I want you to consider today as I kind of wrap up our Wednesday devotional. Are you David? Or are you Jonathan? And maybe it's both. In what I say, when I ask that, I mean it in this way. Are you one who feels isolated, who feels afraid, who needs somebody else to come to you and say, don't be afraid, God's going to fulfill his promises for you, and I'm with you. If you're David in that situation, I hope and I pray that there are many other Jonathans who will come to you and remind you of who you are, of who God is, and that they're with you. But if you, even if nobody else does, I want you to consider me today your David. I'm sorry, I want you to consider me today your Jonathan, to remind you, don't be afraid. God is going to fulfill his promises, and I'm with you. And it may be on the other side of that, I want you to consider, are you a Jonathan? Who in it? So let me wrap it up like this. Who in your life, and take a moment and pray about this, who in your life needs to hear from you? It might be an extended family member. It might be an old classmate. It might be a coworker. Who needs to hear from you and be encouraged by you? And I want to encourage you to make that connection in the next few hours, in the next few days. Make that connection. Be that Jonathan to them, because just as David needed that from his best friend Jonathan, that person or those people that you're going to contact, hey, they need you. They need you to be that Jonathan. So would you do that? And God bless you. And I'm looking forward to our continued Wednesday devotionals.